Okay, so when we talk about writing these inequalities in interval notation, the very first thing I do is graph it, because then I can physically see the graph and then I can think to myself how I'm supposed to write that interval. So we're going to do a number line, and when I say that, just a small line. And all I need to do is put that number 3 in the middle. And when we graph, we shade the number line. So we're going to shade to the right or to the left based off of what the inequality is. But the very first question I will always ask you is, am I going to use an open circle at 3 or a closed circle at 3? Does anybody remember? Why closed? Because I have the little equal to sign line under my inequality. So that says greater than or equal to. So off to the side over here, I'm just going to write that. If it's greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to, you're going to use a closed circle. That means you're just going to do a circle and shade it in. So I'm going to draw a circle at 3, but I'm also going to shade that in. That's what I mean by closed circle. If it is just greater than or just less than without the little line under it, then it will be an open circle. Everybody remembers that, right? Okay. And then the inequality says x is, that is greater than, okay, when it is open to the left, that's greater than. So if I am greater than 3, imagine 3 somewhere right here, greater than, which way would I shade? To the left or to the right? To the right. So I'm going to shade that number line, whoops, to the right. And that's what my graph will look like, because especially when we get into our compound inequalities next week, you have to do the graph to determine what the answer is. So far, so good? Okay. Now we want to talk about writing our interval notation. And a lot of times it's going to look very similar to an ordered pair. But with interval notation, we're going to use brackets, which look like square parentheses, or parentheses. Okay? Sometimes you use one, sometimes you use one of each, sometimes you use both the same. A bracket, or the square ones, are going to go with the equal to signs. If I am actually equal to a number, then I'm going to use a bracket. Okay, so if I have that little equal to line under it, it's going to be a bracket. Or if I have a closed circle, it's going to be a bracket. If it is an open circle or not equal to, that's when we use parentheses. Has anybody not seen interval notation before? Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my graph. And again, which direction do we read? Left, right. So I'm going to start at the far right. Remember, far left. What's to the far left? Negative infinity. Am I shaded out here at negative infinity? No. And I don't have any shading or circles represented until I get to what number? 3. So 3 is going to be the first number in my interval notation. Am I equal to 3 or not equal to 3? Equal to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bracket, and I'm going to put 3, and then I'm going to put a comma, and I'm going to represent everything that is shaded on this graph. So it is shaded from 3 to infinity, all the way to the right. There's no skipping places, there's no jumping, it's just a constant shading from 3 all the way to infinity. And so I'm going to put infinity. Question, can I equal infinity? No, I cannot. So I am always going to use a parenthesis when it comes to infinity. It's either negative infinity or positive infinity, but we will always use a parenthesis there because we cannot equal infinity. Everybody okay with that? All right, I want you to try the next two. There's no solving to it. It's just draw your graph and then write your interval notation based off of that graph. Did you want that? Did you want this one? I had it turned this way. I don't have to turn it that way. We are graphing x is less than or equal to -5, and then writing that in interval notation, then you're going to do the same thing with x is greater than 7. Draw a graph and then write your interval notation. With my number line graph for x is less than or equal to -5, what number do I put on it? -5. Okay, the only number that I have in my inequality. Am I going to be an open circle or a closed circle at -5? Closed. And then less than, does that go to the left or to the right? To the left. Okay, so again, thinking about what we have shaded, we're going to write the interval based off of the shaded area. Start to the far left. Am I shaded at the far left? Yes, so what does that take me to? Negative infinity. Is that a parenthesis or a bracket? Bracket. No. Parenthesis, because we can't ever be equal to infinity. Also, just remember your smallest numbers are on the left, your largest numbers are on the right. That's left to right, that's how we read. And then I'm going to go all the way to what number? -5. And then at -5, is it going to be a parenthesis or a bracket? A bracket, because I'm actually equal to -5. And that's what the interval is going to look like for that one. We kind of okay with that? All right, and then x is greater than 7. I'm going to draw my number line. I'm going to put 7 on it. Open or closed circle? Open, left or right? To the right. And then for my interval notation, am I going to start off with a parenthesis or a bracket? Parenthesis, what number? 7 all the way to infinity, parenthesis or bracket? So that's just to introduce the interval notation. Does everybody feel pretty comfortable with that? Okay. We're going to start off with some basic inequalities. We solve basic inequalities just like we solve basic inequations. You treat the inequality as an equal sign. Once you get your variable is either greater than or less than some number, we're going to go to our graph. We're going to graph it, and then we're going to write our final answer in interval notation. So I would like for you to go ahead and try both of these. Pretend it says x plus 4 equals 9. Solve it how you normally would. Just keep the inequality in place of the equal. It doesn't change how you solve the equation. The only thing it changes is the answer. You're going to have a range of values as an answer instead of just one. Solve both inequalities, graph them, and write the interval notation for them for my solution, please. X plus 4 is greater than 9. How am I going to get that 4 away from the x? Subtract it, yep. So x is going to be greater than 5. Number line here. Open or closed circle? Open, greater than, left or right? Right? And then as far as my interval goes, where do I start? Parenthesis or bracket? Parenthesis, because I'm not equal to. What number's first? 5. And then I go all the way to the right, which is to infinity with a parenthesis. Is everybody okay with that one? Sorry, something stuck in my throat. All right, number 5, I got 3x plus 7 is greater than or equal to negative 8. I'm going to subtract my 7 over. That's negative 15. And then what do I divide by? 3. And so x is going to be greater than or equal to negative 5. Now I want to stop here for just a second. Because with this question, specifically when we first start back with inequalities, some people say, well, I remember a rule that says if I divide by a negative, I have to do what? Split the inequality. Okay, but what I need you to think about is this. What am I actually dividing by? What am I giving away from x? 3. Is that 3 negative? No. So I'm dividing by a positive. I'm dividing into a negative, but I'm not dividing by a negative. So just be very careful with that. The only time you want to flip your sign is if the number in front of x or whatever your variable is negative. This is not negative, so even though the other one is, I don't have to change my sign. So just be very careful. I'm going to be greater than or equal to, is that open or closed? Closed, left or right? To the right. So what is my interval going to look like? Parenthesis or bracket? Bracket, and then negative 5 all the way to positive infinity, parenthesis. Remember, smallest number on the left, largest number on the right, because we read from left to right, and number line goes from smallest to largest. Is everybody okay with that? All right, try these next two. Same thing, except for now, what kind of numbers are in front of your variables? Negative. So these are going to be the cases where we are going to need to remember to flip that inequality. If I have negative 4z is less than 12, how do I get rid of that negative 4? Divide. And because I'm dividing by a negative, I'm going to have to do what? Yep, it's going to be z. I'm going to change that less than to greater than. And 12 divided by negative 4 is negative 3. My pen will cooperate with me. Open or closed circle. Left or right? To the right. And so for my interval, I start with a parenthesis or a bracket. What number? All the way to? And then another parenthesis. Okay, because you divided by that negative there, remember that inequality is going to have to change around. It was a less than, it needs to become greater than. Does anybody have any questions on that one? When I'm dividing, I'm dividing by a negative number, the number that I'm getting next to. So anytime you divide by a negative number, you're going to take and flip the inequality around. With number 7, I have 4 minus 3x is greater than negative 17. I want to get that negative 3x by itself, so I'm going to get rid of the 4. And how do I do that? Subtract. I'm going to subtract the 4 because it is a positive 4. Just be careful. I did notice, maybe not particularly in this class, but overall, some people forgot the sign that was in front of the number. If there's a negative there, you need to bring that down. So that's going to be a negative 3x that I have left. And then negative 17 minus 4 is negative 21. And then I'm going to divide by a negative 3. And again, I'm dividing by a negative, so that greater than is going to change to less than. And negative 21 divided by negative 3 is 7. Open or closed circle. Left or right? Okay, interval, parenthesis or bracket? Parenthesis, what number first? 7 all the way to infinity in another parenthesis? I said left and shaded right, didn't I? That's why y'all are just looking at me.
You said left, then you said right, and then you shaded right because you didn't second guess.
Oh, I don't know. I said left. I don't know. Who knows? Anyway, let me fix my mistake because I messed up. So let's go start out. It's going to be parenthesis and then what goes first? No, what I was sitting here thinking myself was like, that was not what was on everybody's paper when I was walking around, and I said that was right, so I was confusing myself. Anyway, comma, 7 and then parentheses. That looks better, right? Everybody okay? Same thing. I scratched out one of those because I don't want you to do it. Just do number 8. I want you to solve it. I'm going to see if maybe this one, a couple of different situations can happen, and I want to take a look at how you solve it and see what comes up so that we can make sure we talk about it. The key here is particularly with inequalities. In order to read my inequality properly, the variable has to be on the left side. But when I'm solving these inequalities, it's not always the easiest to get the variable on the left side. So I want to kind of talk about what happens and what to do in that situation if it occurs. But go ahead and go solve this as you would. Distribute, get your y's together, and go from there. I'm going to start by distributing on both sides of this inequality. Now from, there I go, making a mistake again. Try that. From here, there are a couple of different approaches, and it depends on what you're comfortable with as to what you're going to do. So let me ask you this. How many of you took the 2y and subtracted it over to the 3y? Okay. How many of you took the 3y and subtracted it over to the 2y? Okay. Either one is going to work, but what I want to talk about is, I'm going to do both ways actually to show you, but what I'm going to talk about is what happens in the case of taking that 2y over to the 3y. So if I were to subtract this 2y over, oh my goodness. And then we would have to take that 12 and add it over to the other side, right? Everybody agree with that? It's time for me to go home. I keep making mistake after mistake after mistake. And that's what we get, right? Like the other one before I talk about that. Some of us took the 3y and subtracted it over. That gave me a negative y plus 10 is less than or equal to negative 12. We subtract our 10 over. And then we get negative y is less than or equal to negative 22. But we can't leave a negative variable, right? So we're going to divide both sides by negative 1. And again, when we divide by a negative, we have to take and do what with our inequality? Flip it. Okay. So when I solve this one, I get y is greater than or equal to 22. Is this the same?
Yes.
Look at that inequality symbol. It's open towards your y, isn't it? Is the inequality symbol open towards my y here? Yeah. It's just my y is on the wrong side. Okay. This is where people make mistakes. It's because this is the correct answer. It's just when we read it, we need to read it with the variable first. Okay. So if this situation occurs to you as you're solving an inequality, before you go to your graph, what we want to do is just rewrite this. All you have to do is just take everything and flip it around. You move the y to the front, you move the 22 to the back, and this inequality is open towards the y, so it's going to stay open. So basically, I just took that whole thing and flipped it. Is that now the same thing as what's on the TV? Okay. So just be careful with that. Sometimes that's going to happen. You're going to have the variable on the right side. It's just when we read it, we need our variable is greater than or less than, so I can decide how to graph and how to write my interval. Okay. So on this one, am I going to be open or closed at 22? Left or right? Let me make sure I do that the correct way this time. And so then when I go to my interval, do I start with a parenthesis or a bracket? Bracket, and then 22 comma infinity parentheses. Is everybody good with that? I've got one more. Because just like our equations, we started easy and then we had to throw what in them? We can just call that number 9, so just give it number 9. Write it down. We're going to work through this up to a certain point, and then I'm going to let you finish it. So much like our equations, in order to solve, I need to get rid of my fractions. I can multiply an inequality by the same number just as well as I can multiply an equation by the same number, as long as I multiply every part of it. So here's my first question. What are my two denominators? 5 and 4. I need to know what number can both 5 and 4 divide into evenly. 20. So what we want to do is we're going to multiply everything through by 20. I'm going to start with that first fraction, and I'm going to come over here to the side just to show my work. If I could get my pen to work would help. Now think about how we did this. We look at the denominator. We ask ourselves, how many times does 5 divide into 20? 4. So the 5 is going to disappear. The 20 is going to turn to a 4. And what do I do with that 4? Multiply it by that whole numerator. How many parts are there? 2. So before I do anything, I'm just going to put those 2 in parentheses so that I don't forget to distribute. Then what some of us did on our quiz was we forgot the whole number. That is part of my inequality, so I need to take that 20 and multiply it by that 2 to give me a minus 40. And then we're going to multiply 20 by the next fraction. Oh, stop it. Pulling that over here to the side so you can see what I'm doing. How many times does 4 divide into 20? 5. And then that 5 gets multiplied by that y to give me just 5y. Finish it, please. Very similar to our equation. We just get a common denominator, multiply everything by that. First thing I need to do is to distribute that 4 to that y and that negative 3. Bring down that 40. And before I start doing anything else, I want to combine those. What's negative 12 and negative 40 going to give me? Bless you. Now, in this case, 4y minus 52 is less than or equal to 5y. Does it make sense for me to move the 5y first? No. Makes sense for me to move the 4y even though it's going to the wrong side just because I need to get it with the 5y that's already over by itself. So, I'm going to subtract 4y over. That is going to leave me with a negative 52 is less than or equal to 5y minus 4y is 1y. That is the correct answer. However, before I start trying to graph, I want the variable on the left side. So I'm just going to take that whole thing and what with it? Flip it. So it's going to be y is now greater than or equal to negative 52. Open or closed circle. Closed, left or right. Okay. Interval, bracket or parentheses. Okay, start with negative 52 and we go all the way to infinity with a parenthesis.